it's been 2 years since we've been doing this live on stage, so this is exciting, but also very intimidating, and it feels like the first time. So thank you all for being such a great audience. By the way, this slide is the wrong way. So I'm Amir, and next to me is Dino, Henry, and then Ajay. So one of the things we have to learn how to do, slides, and real life coordination. So I'd like to start with you, Dino, as being the professor in charge of all of this. Give us a quick overview. Like many tech nerds here, give us a quick overview about the technology and behind Cytovale.
Yeah, no, thanks, Amir, and thanks for the invitation for all of us to come and share our story. So I don't want to get deep into technical details here, but I think the key fundamentals behind what we're doing at Cytovale is looking at how cells and their physical properties, biophysical properties, not molecular properties, which is what people have been doing for a long period of time, how that can tell us something about disease. And in particular, how we can measure that really, really rapidly in order to diagnose diseases that where it's an emergent sort of condition. So in particular, sepsis, and we'll hear more about that, I think, through our discussion. So the technology we developed is using microfluidics, and this is Henry developed this in the lab at UCLA, now I guess 10 years ago, and that microfluidic technology, and maybe Henry, you can explain a little bit more about it if I don't get it exactly right. That microfluidic technology, we measure cells as they squeeze by fluids with high-speed cameras, and then we can measure basically something about their structure from that, and that gives us something about the health of the human where those cells came from.
So Henry, because Dino organized this so nicely for you, many firsts in your story, right? So can you walk us through the first things that happened to you between UCLA and Cytovale?
Yes, many firsts. I think the first starts with being the first group in Dino's lab at UCLA when he started. That being the first group of students, I think a unique scenario. I think that set us up for a really lean mentality of making sure we get to that next value inflection of getting that next data point to build that next figure for Dino to get that next grant to fund the next year of work for us. That's really set the foundation of how to do things quickly in a lean way and build value. Being first group of students. I think the first also in terms of this technology, being able to measure cellular biophysics really rapidly, and to do that using the inertial microfluidic approaches that Dino pioneered, and the lab, I think, as the first pioneering understanding of that science and contributing that to the field. Taking this inertial microfluidics technique and trying to productize it, I think that's also a first in productizing biophysical properties for clinical diagnostics. I think lots of firsts there and lots of hard lessons that we learned along the way. And hopefully, first to market in being able to position this product for patients in acute care settings that it's able to diagnose sepsis early to improve their quality of life.
So Henry, on your website, you emphasize, and I read this because I like the quote, the importance of curiosity and collaboration. How did that come into play in your research and then building the company?
Maybe I can start in the research and also emphasize the importance of serendipity and reaching out to collaborators on campus. So initially, I think what we were trying to do with this work with using microfluidics and high-speed cameras was something completely different, looking at how we can put genes into cells. And I think Henry, as he did some initial experiments, saw that these cells were deforming in very interesting ways, and that led down the path that we took to using this in a diagnostic fashion. Henry also reached out to Dr. Junyu Rao, who's a professor and cytopathologist, chief of the cytopathology department here at UCLA, to collaborate on this project, and that probably led us down a path as we were measuring some of these body fluids that accumulate cells during malignancy, we were starting to see some of these inflamed states, so other types of white blood cells. And I think Henry noticed that we're seeing very unique differences in those white blood cells that led maybe down to the path of looking at other conditions where you have inflammation like sepsis. So, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of serendipity, right? One thing led to another, and then allowed us to follow the data. I think that's a quote on your website. Follow the data to get us to stronger hypothesis, get us to a foundation that we believe in for Cytovale. Measuring leukocytes to allow us to diagnose sepsis.
So Ajay, from this science, how did you collide with this team and became the CEO of Cytovale?
Sure. Well, I had the privilege and pleasure of meeting Dino when I was a grad student, and Dino mentored me and told me, think about what are the figures you want to make first, then draw them, and then go get the data. But from that beginning and getting to collaborate with him, we kept in touch about a lot of the different projects that he was doing in his lab in the early days. And I still remember visiting this campus, when Dino was a brand new faculty member and being a guest of his at the faculty club, and we both felt like we were sneaking in for the first time. And so to go from there to being here today is just a great privilege to share the story with all of you. I think that the journey that the three of us undertook over the last several years has been about taking that idea and taking that piece of inspiration and then figuring out how we can build a foundation underneath it. How we can take the insights that Henry and Dino saw in the mechanical properties behind white blood cells while we were staring at a large optical bench and envision how we can turn that into a kind of standalone product that can be placed in a hospital lab. And I'm happy to share that over the last several years, that's exactly what the team has done. Under Henry's guidance, has transformed that product into a real benchtop instrument that's been clinically validated, that's been placed in probably a half dozen hospitals across the country and used in multi-center clinical trials to create data that we'll be submitting to the FDA soon.
So what made you choose sepsis as your first indication? That's a tough problem, an acute problem, but a tough problem to solve.
Probably a bit of naivete for all of us. I think it's because it was a huge problem, right? Because was a real excitement around tackling a true unmet clinical need. I think there's a number of MedTech products that do great innovations by doing things better, faster, and cheaper, and doing what we do today better. What we took on here was a challenge to unlock new biology, and that's because we felt like this technology, because it was label-free, and because it had the potential to have a turnaround time in minutes, could really change emergency department care. And so we saw the opportunity where the technology met the biology, met the clinical need, and then there was just too much excitement to not go after it.
So tell me about the day in the life of Cytovale. How does the three of you work together? What are the complementary skill sets that each one of you bring to the table?
I'd love for Dino and Henry to chime in here, but I think that's changed with each phase of the business, right? And so in the very early days, I can describe a moment to you when we were submitting our first NIH, NSF, SBIR grants, and the company was still an idea, and still very much a concept. And we were on phone calls and probably I think the pre-Zoom days, desperately trying to turn in 6 grants all on one day. And it was probably, I think it was staying up all for 24 hours to get that out there. In those days, we were very much, as we are today, peers and partners, but very much all in the weeds and very much doing the science. Contrast that with last week, when we had a board meeting, and Dino, as a founder of the company, serves also as a board member at the company, and one of my 5 bosses. And he flew up for the day. I saw him for a few hours in the office. We caught up about life, but the meeting was mostly about how do we build out the team from here? How do we get our data through FDA and get the technology out on the commercial landscape? In the meantime, in that meeting, Henry joined for a few minutes and really shared his vision around building out his, now couple dozen person organization. and building out the operational scope. And so we've evolved from those very clear roots here to, a much broader organization that we all get to play, a unique role in.
I think important to that is just having, all of us are engineers, or even Ajay.
Even me.
Absolutely. All of us are engineers. All of us have a strong foundation on the technical and science bits. I think importantly, each one of us brings a different value to the group, right? Dino from the academic side, knowing how to position and talk about technology for the grant bits, and also the connections in academia, and Ajay knowing the commercial landscape there. So all of us at the beginning brought different pieces to the group.
So Dino, help me out here. Every once in a while, I meet with faculty, and some of them are still resisting the concept of technology transfer. They say they don't like the concept of the capitalism of science. Help me out, formulate an answer to that.
I think so. I think that this is counter to our goal of getting our work out there and helping people, right? So holding ideas or holding technologies internal, not being involved in the amount of, it takes a lot of money to, the reality is it takes a lot of people, a lot of money. All three of us, we're not the only people, right? Cytovale is a 50+ person organization now. It takes a village. I'm sounding lame now, but it takes a village. It takes more than a village to bring these technologies that are ideas, really, that maybe get past the first level of proof of concept out there to help. In the end, we want to help as many people as possible with the technologies that we develop. So keeping it internal, preventing that technology transfer through whether it's trying to hold it for yourself, or whether it's because there is a thought that is somehow too capitalistic or not what an academic should do. I think that is not serving our goals in the long run as academics to help the world and bring technologies to as many people as possible.
And Henry, we have many people in the audience that are in the same situation you were 10 years ago, right? They are either finished their PhD or about to finish their PhD. They're thinking, what should I do next? Should I be an entrepreneur? Should I continue an academic track? Should I just move to a big industrial company? What made you want to become an entrepreneur, and what advice you can offer these young people?
Yeah, I think the advice there is at a small group, I think life and growth accelerates significantly. Probably every year you spend with a small team, you learn as much as 5 times, right, 6 times as much as a big corporate environment. Something to try for everybody at least once, see if you like it. Different pace, different stress level. It's something that's unique.
You still have your hair, though.
I have a lot more gray hairs now. It's a unique experience. It's definitely recommended to try. It may not be for everybody. I think for myself, having a strong foundation from Dino and from Ajay gave me a lot of confidence to step in, and from my technical contributions, understand how I'm being supported. I think having first a strong team, strong founding team, built a lot of confidence in making that step.
Ajay, you recently announced starting enrolling patients for your pivotal trial. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. We actually had the distinct pleasure of running a multi-center clinical study in the emergency department in an infectious disease indication through 2021. And so if you want to talk about things you didn't see coming, that was one of them. But no, through that, we actually announced that we finished enrollment in our clinical study in October of last year. We unlocked the data in January of this year. And while we can't speak much to the results themselves, suffice to say that we're pretty excited by what we saw, and we're moving forward with an FDA submission.
So let's dig into this. How did COVID change your life in a startup company running a clinical trial?
Sure. I think that the pandemic in general has had an effect on, obviously, everybody as an individual. on every company, in terms of, at the end of the day, there's 50 people who, look at Henry and I and are looking for some guidance and direction on what the next day looks like. And that's true for every company, and for every person. But I think what's unique about Cytovale is, as I alluded to, this is our space, right? This is our field, which is really looking at the immune response to infection. And so I think you can all imagine two people, both of whom are positive for SARS-CoV-2, the virus, one of whom is jogging down the street and doesn't even know it, and the other is in an ICU bed. And the difference between those two is not the positive PCR test that they both have, but how their body's responding to it. We recognized this early on, and so, in March, right as the US was starting to shut down and the first waves were hitting, we interacted with a number of our clinical partners and colleagues and realized the opportunity to, while there were many others focusing on detection of the virus itself, focus on looking at the immune response. And so actually, as the world was shutting down, Henry and his team prepped a couple instruments. I brought together the clinical team, and we went to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in the throes of COVID, and in 30 days ran a 300-patient clinical study that'll actually be published next week in PLOS One, where we look at being able to identify those patients who are going to decline due to their immune response to the infection, and demonstrate in that publication that we're able to predict mortality differences quite starkly. And so the way that changed Cytovale as a company was it brought overall kind of lay public recognition to the importance of understanding the immune response to infection. Right? This is something that we'd focused on from the first days Henry saw cells squish here at UCLA, but wasn't something that we could talk to our grandparents about. Right? Now it is. And so it's brought a renewed sense of purpose and mission to the team, brought the concept of infection being an emergency and sepsis, into the lay vernacular, which has been quite great. It's also taken us for a roller coaster, even as much as it's taken everybody else. We've had moments of thinking we need to figure out how to make 1,000 instruments tomorrow, and we've had moments of thinking we might never finish executing this clinical study because, all the hospitals are overwhelmed and nobody's doing any research, right? And so it's just been, I'd say, if being on a startup is a roller coaster, the last 24 months have been, a extreme super roller coaster.
So in your roadmap for the company, what's next? When
Sure.
when do you think you'll be able to start commercially deploying your
Sure.
solution?
Well, as I mentioned, we're looking forward to sharing our data with FDA and engaging in that review process with them through this year, and then hopefully following receiving a clearance, able to get the technology out in front of patients and helping emergency departments.
Earlier today we heard from the investor panel, and they had some kind of tips of what to do and what not to do and how to pitch companies to investors. I mean, you obviously raise significant amount of money because you have a big group of people working in the company right now. From your cumulative experience in doing a roadshow from seed to round A or B, wherever you are now, what can you share with the audience about your experiences in fundraising?
Sure. It's not for the faint of heart. No, but beyond that, I think it's about, be true to yourself, be true to the vision you believe in, and understand, as much as there will be moments when you think that every dollar is green, the reality is find people who believe in your vision, find people who align with your values and how you want to build an organization and how you want to get technology out there, and it'll make the journey that much more enjoyable.
Dino, how was it for you the early days as a faculty member going out there and trying to raise money?
Yeah, so there's definitely some stories. So some of the first money in, I guess, to Cytovale was.
This is a good one.
Was a $50,000 check from an angel group in Rhode Island. Why Rhode Island? For some reason, we were in Rhode Island pitching an angel group in the basement, and they were, the family there was offering us cookies, so we were eating our cookies and pitching. And and then I think at the end of the meeting they agreed to invest, and we were super psyched for that first 50K, right? And obviously it's taken more than 50K to get where we're at here. And so but that first money always feels really, really great that someone is believing in your vision. So definitely I have backed away from that level of involvement since I'm not able to have time to do that anymore. And there's obviously Ajay and Henry and the team here now is taking the lead. But I still remember that. I think that those experiences stick with you, and it's a journey, right? It's part of it is these events create the journey, create the group of people around you that are, like Ajay said, have this shared vision of what the future can look like.
Yeah. What Dino didn't tell you is that we changed into our suits in a McDonald's bathroom a block away.
So any advice for people who are just going after their first 50K check? I mean, what to do or what to avoid? Perhaps we take it by order, Dino, and then Henry and Ajay.
Yeah. I think I guess the advice that I have, the main advice I have is that that there is a lot of money, right? So there is a lot of money out there, more lately, given how much money was printed, but there's a lot of money out there. And the thing is, really dovetails on what Ajay said, is you have to find the right people that are aligned with your vision. It's not to say that you don't take feedback from that during that fundraising process, but everyone will say something for a certain reason and they're all coming from a different mindset and a different background. So they might not have all of that information that you have and so you just have to understand that, and understand that there's some people that may not, even if you explain it as well as you can, you're not going to come to an agreement on the value that you think you have with whatever you're pitching. So I think stick to what you believe in, and find those folks that can align with your vision.
I think my advice here would be, I think, know the audience you're talking to. Like more likely than not, they're not going to be a technical audience, and you have to craft your story to be able to get your message through to those folks. And sometimes there are technical audiences, but probably not. So then, in those cases, how do you explain your value proposition, your mission, the vision in a way that they can understand? I think coming from the PhD graduate program, you're taught to think very technically, graphs and plots and whatever else, but this is about creating a story. So
in your story, you mentioned your gray hair. Was there any moment in time where you say, okay, I've had it, it's not going to happen, I'm willing to give up?
Tuesdays?
Yeah, Wednesdays for me. It's so this whole journey of Cytovale over the last decade, almost a decade, has been a lot of challenges. I think every year, Jay, our role shifts and changes. Different things pop up week to week. That's kind of what's going to kill us first, right? And we have to solve those. Early on, mentioned taking the microfluidics out of Dino's lab, the inertial microfluidics, super high speed stuff, really cool and interesting, super cool science, lots of physics, really, really difficult to do in industry, and not something that the best in industry were able to do, but at our lab at UCLA or at our nano facilities here, we're able to do that day in, day out. And trying to cross that gap of academic and industry type capabilities, that was a huge challenge. Once again, quit over it was a fun problem, but it was definitely a lot of head banging, lots of gray hairs on that one. There's many examples of those, but along the way, you got to realize, what success means. Success means, solve a problem, a cool problem. Hopefully, you're motivated to do every day, wake up to do it, and it's a journey. Whatever success is at the end of it, it is whatever it is. But at least along the way, meet a lot of cool people, to have a lot of growth and enjoy the challenge. So.
Okay. Any words of wisdom for?
I'll kind of go back to the investor question, for those who are out there thinking about that. I would say, one, I'd approach it as try to learn something new in every conversation, right? And that might be learning about your own pitch and figuring out what parts aren't resonating and refining that. Learning, I think one of the people on the investor panel mentioned, when you get a no, ask somebody, who do you know who might be interested? Right, and learning that and understanding those patterns that can help get you new introductions is super helpful. But I think probably the thing that has helped us along the way is after each conversation that didn't go our way, and there were many, after we blow off steam and talk about how that person could possibly think that or say that, the next question we say to each other is, okay, well, what did they say that was interesting? What did they say that we should follow up on or go research or understand more about? And what we've come to appreciate is that 2 years later, that same point will come back up and we'll have a thoughtful comment about it.
Great. Dina, is it time for Q&A or? Yeah, because we're having fun here, so we can continue.
Hello. Thanks so much for the story and inspiration. My name is Jean Pham. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a new diagnostic company out of Tufts University. So very similar academic spin-out story from what you just shared with Cytovale. I have a question on the market side, meaning like you guys actually changing the current standard of care on how emergency department are diagnosing sepsis. How did you go about finding the first early supporter? Like who gonna try this new technology that is unvalidated? Like how did you go about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the early clinical supporters that worked with us, I think we met in conferences, right? I think so. One Dr. Hollis O'Neill is one of our really early supporters that's run several clinical studies with us, and so I think maybe just to talk about the advice that I would give is be out there communicating what you're planning to do, what your vision is. Obviously, get input. But that will also bring people to you and build those connections that help you go to the next level. So I guess the other thing you could do is be in stealth mode, right, and not talk about what you're doing and not share it with anyone. But that will prevent those sorts of interactions, which then build the community around you. Obviously, there's times when that stealth mode might be important. The technology is not developed yet. You're not even knowing what you need to do yet. But that building those connections at clinical conferences, in your institutions with the clinicians, that's going to help you kind of lay that foundation for the adopters in the future.
So one last question before we finish. Dino and Henry, tell me about the UCLA factor here. How impactful is it to be associated with UCLA in this 10 years journey?
Yeah, and I think the partnership with UCLA, with TDG, with the medical school, with clinicians, like I mentioned, Dr. Janyu Rao, that's been really important for us to quickly get to a point where we could say there's something here, right? So kind of the ease at which you can put together an IRB protocol and work with a clinical collaborator and that cannot be understated for kind of getting to the next level. So that's definitely been a great part of being part of the UCLA community, and I know there's been great partnerships with TDG in terms of translating and getting the technology out there, making that a seamless process, more of a partnership, not an adversarial relationship. So that's something that I've appreciated as well.
Yeah, I think echoing all of that and the partnership with TDG, knowing that this is a new technology, that we need to develop a product. And there's a long along a roadmap too, and being supportive of that vision. That's definitely appreciated, and working as partners.
Gentlemen, thank you very much, and good luck the rest of your journey.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having us.
Thank you.